The Time Traveler's Guide to Tomorrow by Janson Davies. Chapter 1. The Secret Scientist. Connor Fields had always been a man of dualities. By day, he wore the crisp lab coat of an astrophysicist at the Fargo Research Institute, a private think tank nestled in the wooded outskirts of Maryland. His colleagues knew him as brilliant but reserved, a man who spoke in equations and rarely joined the post-lab banter. They admired his mind, but never truly understood it. By night, Connor shed the constraints of institutional science and stepped into the role he had never dared to share: time traveler. His sanctuary was not a sleek laboratory, but a cluttered garage behind his modest home. The walls were lined with copper coils, quantum field regulators, and a whiteboard so dense with calculations it looked like the ravings of a madman. In the center of it all stood his greatest creation, a vest stitched with insulated fibers, embedded with a dimensional portal core powered by a stabilized tachyon field. It was ugly. It was dangerous. And it worked. Theoretical physicists at Fargo debated wormholes and black holes, chasing mathematical ghosts. Connor had bypassed the theories. He had built the thing. He had already made several jumps into the future. Short ones, controlled. He never stayed long, never interacted. He was meticulous about avoiding contact with anyone. The risk of contamination, temporal or emotional, was too great. He never traveled to the past. The grandfather paradox haunted him like a specter. One misstep, one butterfly crushed beneath his boot, and the entire timeline could unravel. His vest was his secret. His solitude was his shield. But secrets have gravity. They pull at the soul. Connor had begun to feel it. The weight of knowledge unshared, of discoveries unspoken. He had seen cities floating above oceans, languages spoken through neural pulses, and governments that no longer resembled anything he knew. He had watched freedom morph into obedience, and individuality dissolve into algorithmic conformity. One morning, as the sun filtered through the blinds of his kitchen, Connor made a decision. He would begin a journal. Not a scientific log, but a guidebook, a map for those who might follow. A record of what lay ahead, not just the technology, but the culture, the customs, the consequences. He titled it The Time Traveler's Guide to Tomorrow. It would be his legacy, his confession, his warning. And it would begin with a single entry. Time is not a line, it is a landscape, and I have walked its hills. Chapter 2. The journal begins. Connor's handwriting was precise, almost surgical, each letter carved into the page like a data point in a cosmic equation. But this journal was different. It wasn't a lab report or a technical manual. It was a reckoning. He sat at his workbench, the vest hanging beside him like a silent sentinel. The journal lay open, its first page already marked with the words, "Time is not a line. It is a landscape, and I have walked its hills." He stared at the blank second page, unsure where to begin. The future was not a single place. It was a kaleidoscope of possibilities. Each jump had revealed a different facet of humanity's trajectory. Some were breathtaking, others were terrifying. He began with geography. The coastlines had shifted. Rising seas had swallowed cities he once knew. Miami was gone. Venice was a memory. In their place were floating settlements, modular, solar-powered, and eerily quiet. The air was cleaner, but the silence felt imposed. Next, he documented language. English had splintered into dialects shaped by neural implants and augmented cognition. People spoke in compressed phrases, optimized for speed and clarity. Emotion was often lost in translation. Then came governance. This was where Connor hesitated. He had seen the slow erosion of personal freedoms, not through war or revolution, but through convenience. Citizens surrendered privacy for efficiency, autonomy for safety. Governments became algorithms. Elections were obsolete. Authority was distributed through a hierarchy of behavioral scores, an invisible caste system enforced by data. Connor called it the authoritative hierarchy theory. It wasn't tyranny in the traditional sense. It was compliance masquerading as progress. He wrote, "Freedom did not die. It was traded, piece by piece, for comfort, for certainty, for the illusion of control." Connor felt a chill, not from the future, but from the realization that its seeds were already planted in his present. He flipped to a new page and began mapping customs. In one era, mourning rituals involved uploading memories to a shared cloud, allowing loved ones to relive moments with the deceased. In another, relationships were contractually time-bound, love as a subscription service. He documented fashion, food, art. He noted the absence of religion in some centuries and its resurgence in others, often fused with technology in strange hybrid forms. But what struck him most was the loneliness. Despite the advancements, people seemed more isolated. Connection was mediated through screens, implants, and curated personas. Authenticity was rare, vulnerability rarer still. Connor closed the journal for the night. He looked at the vest. It hummed softly, waiting. He knew he would return, not just to explore, but to understand, to bear witness, and maybe, someday, to warn. Chapter 3. The Encounter. Connor had always treated time travel like surgery, precise, sterile, and detached. His jumps were brief, his observations clinical. He never stayed long enough to be noticed, never interacted, never interfered. Until the day he heard screaming. It was 200 years ahead. He had landed in what appeared to be a city center, though the architecture was alien. Buildings curved like organic shells, their surfaces shimmering with reactive light. The streets were clean, too clean, and eerily quiet. Then the scream shattered the silence. Connor froze. His training, self-imposed and rigid, told him to retreat. But something in the sound pierced through his caution. It wasn't just pain. It was desperation. He followed the noise down a narrow alley between two buildings. There, in a shadowed alcove, he saw her. A woman, no older than 30, was being dragged by two men in sleek, dark uniforms. Their faces were expressionless, their movements mechanical. One held a baton crackling with electricity. The other barked commands in a clipped, digitized dialect. Connor didn't understand the words, but he understood the intent. She was resisting. They were punishing. He stepped forward. The men turned. One raised his baton and struck Connor across the chest. The electric surge fizzled against his insulated vest. No effect. They hesitated. Connor moved fast. He grabbed the woman, shielding her with his body. More enforcers were approaching, 6, maybe 7. He didn't have time to think. He pressed the return button. The world folded inward, light bent, sound collapsed, and then they were in his garage. The woman collapsed onto the concrete floor, gasping. Connor knelt beside her, checking for injuries. She flinched at his touch, eyes wide with terror. "It's okay," he said gently. "You're safe. You're not there anymore." She didn't understand. Not yet. Connor fetched water, a blanket, and a med kit. Her wounds were superficial, bruises, scrapes, a shallow cut on her temple. He treated them carefully, speaking in soft tones, avoiding sudden movements. Eventually, she stopped fighting. She looked around the garage, eyes darting from the vest to the tools to the glowing monitors. Her voice was hoarse. "Where am I?" Connor hesitated. "Home. Mine." She blinked. "What year?" 2025. She stared at him, disbelief etched into every line of her face. "You're from the past?" "No," Connor said. You're from the future. I brought you back. Silence. Then a whisper. Why? Connor didn't have an answer, not one he could articulate. Not yet. He helped her to the guest room, gave her space, and sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the journal. He had broken his rule. He had interfered. And everything was about to change. Chapter 4. The Stranger in the Garage. Her name was Lana, and she didn't sleep that night. Connor could hear her pacing in the guest room, the soft creak of floorboards beneath her bare feet. Occasionally, she'd pause, probably staring at the unfamiliar furniture, the framed photographs, the blinking lights of the digital clock. He didn't blame her. She had been ripped from her time, her world, her reality, and now she was surrounded by relics of a past she had only read about in censored archives. Connor sat in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee gone cold. He didn't know what to say when morning came. He didn't know if she'd still be here. But she was. She emerged slowly, wrapped in the blanket he'd given her, eyes scanning the room like a soldier entering enemy territory. Her posture was defensive, but her expression had softened, just slightly. Connor gestured to the table. There's food, if you're hungry. She hesitated, then sat. Her fingers hovered over the plate, unsure of the utensils. He watched her study the fork like it was a puzzle. "What is this?" she asked. "Scrambled eggs, toast, coffee dot." She picked up the toast, sniffed it, then took a cautious bite. Her eyes widened. "This is real?" Connor nodded. No synthetic proteins, no nutrient paste, just food. She chewed slowly, savoring. Then she looked up. "What's that?" She pointed to the television mounted on the wall. Connor grabbed the remote and turned it on. A news anchor was mid-sentence discussing a local election. Lana flinched at the sound. "They allow this?" she asked. "Unfiltered speech." Connor frowned. "Of course, it's the news." "In my time," she said, "broadcasts are scripted. Approved. Even facial expressions are regulated." Connor leaned forward. "What were those men doing to you?" She looked away. "I failed a loyalty scan. My emotional response to a propaganda feed was insufficient." Connor felt a chill. "They punish you for that?" She nodded. "They call it emotional recalibration. It's supposed to restore compliance." He didn't speak. He couldn't. Lana stood and wandered the room. She touched the microwave, the refrigerator, the bookshelf. She pulled out a novel, Fahrenheit 451, and read the back cover. "This was banned in my time," she said softly. Connor watched her. She was beginning to understand. Not just where she was, but what it meant. He handed her the journal. "This is what I've been writing, a guide to the future, what I've seen, what I've learned." She flipped through the pages, eyes scanning his notes. Her fingers trembled. "You've seen all this?" "Yes." "And you came back?" Connor nodded. "To understand, to warn, to remember." She looked at him, truly looked at him, for the first time. "Why did you save me?" He hesitated. "Because I couldn't not." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then, quietly, she said, "Thank you. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was the beginning." Chapter 5. Two Worlds Collide. The days that followed were quiet, but charged with a strange electricity, like the air before a storm. Lana stayed close, never venturing outside. Connor didn't push. He knew the world beyond his walls would overwhelm her. For now, the house was a sanctuary, a neutral zone between centuries. They began to talk. It started with simple questions. Lana asked about the appliances, the books, the strange rituals of daily life. Connor explained everything, how the coffee maker worked, why people drove cars, what it meant to vote. She listened with wide eyes, absorbing each detail like a refugee learning the customs of a foreign land. Then she began to share. Her voice was steady, but her words were heavy. "In my time," she said one evening, "children are assigned to learning pods at birth. Parents are considered emotionally biased. Education is standardized, optimized for productivity." Connor frowned. "No families." "Families exist, but they're monitored. Emotional bonds are considered inefficient." He didn't respond. He couldn't. Lana continued. "Art is algorithmic. Music is composed by neural networks. Literature is filtered for ideological purity. Even dreams are tracked." Connor leaned forward. "How do people live like that?" "They don't live," she said. "They function." Silence settled between them. Connor stood and retrieved a vinyl record from a shelf. He placed it on the turntable and let the music fill the room. Warm, imperfect, human. Lana closed her eyes. "This is illegal in my time," she whispered. "Unapproved emotional stimuli." Connor watched her. "What did you do before they came for you?" "I was a memory technician. I helped people erase unauthorized experiences." He blinked. "You deleted memories?" She nodded. "I thought I was helping, until I started remembering things I wasn't supposed to." Connor felt a chill. "That's why they came for you." Lana looked at him. "I started writing, secretly, stories, about freedom, about choice." Connor handed her his journal. "Then you understand why I'm writing this." She flipped through the pages again, slower this time. Her fingers traced his notes like they were sacred. "You've seen so much," she said, "but you're still here, still trying." Connor smiled faintly. "Trying to make sense of it, trying to hold on to something real." Lana looked around the room, then back at him. "This place, your time, it's messy, loud, unpredictable." He nodded. "It is." She paused. "I think I like it." That night, they sat together on the couch, watching a film, black and white, full of flaws and heart. Lana cried. Connor didn't speak. He just handed her a tissue. Two worlds had collided, and in the wreckage, something new was beginning to grow. Chapter 6. The Second Vest. Connor had never built a second vest, not because he couldn't. He had the schematics memorized, the materials stockpiled, but because he never imagined needing one. Time travel was a solitary pursuit, a burden, not a gift, something to be endured, not shared. Until Lana. She had begun contributing to the journal, tentatively at first, scribbled notes in the margins, questions beside his observations, then full entries. Her handwriting was elegant, her insights sharp. She saw patterns he missed. Where Connor documented facts, Lana interpreted meaning. She wrote, "The future is not a destination. It is a magnifying glass. It focuses on what we choose to become." Connor read her words and felt something shift. The guide was no longer his alone. It was theirs. So he built the second vest. It took 3 days. Lana helped, learning the tools, the circuitry, the delicate balance of quantum fields. She was a quick study, curious, precise, fearless. When it was finished, Connor handed it to her. "It's yours," he said, "if you want it." She ran her fingers over the fabric, the glowing core, the insulated seams. Then she looked at him. "I want to see it," she said. "All of it." They planned their jumps carefully, 100-year increments, avoiding her era, avoiding anything too close to their own. They wanted distance, perspective. Their first jump together was to the year 2125. They landed in a vertical city suspended above a desert. The air was thin but breathable. The people moved in silence, communicating through neural pulses. Lana watched them with awe. Connor took notes. In 2225, they found a society governed by collective dreaming. Citizens entered sleep cycles together, shaping policy through shared subconscious visions. Lana was fascinated. Connor was unsettled. In 2032-25, they visited a world where individuality had been redefined. People wore masks that changed with their moods, their roles, their desires. Identity was fluid. Lana saw freedom. Connor saw fragmentation. Each jump added pages to the guide. Each page was a dialogue. They debated ethics, autonomy, evolution. They laughed at strange customs, mourned lost traditions, and marveled at humanity's resilience. Lana wrote, "We are not defined by our time. We are defined by how we respond to it." Connor added, "And by what we choose to remember." They returned home after each journey, exhausted but exhilarated. The journal grew thick with entries, sketches, maps, and reflections. One night, as they sat in the garage, surrounded by notes and tools, Lana looked at Connor. "This guide, it's more than a record. It's a story." Connor nodded. "Our story." She smiled. "Then let's keep writing." And so they did, together. Chapter 7. The Guide Takes Shape. The journal was no longer just a book. It had grown into a sprawling archive, handwritten pages, annotated diagrams, digital overlays, even audio recordings. Connor had begun integrating neural transcription modules, allowing Lana to speak her thoughts directly into the guide. Her voice, layered with emotion and insight, gave the entries a new dimension. They called it the Time Traveler's Guide to Tomorrow, but it was becoming something more, a mosaic of futures, a tapestry of what could be, what might be, and what should never be again. Connor had always approached time travel like a scientist. Lana approached it like a storyteller. Together they made the guide human. In the year 2425, they visited a society where empathy was currency. People wore emotion sensors that translated feelings into social value. The more compassion you showed, the more influence you had. It was beautiful and fragile. Lana wrote, "Empathy is powerful, but when commodified, it becomes performance." In 2525, they found a world governed by silence. Language had been abandoned in favor of telepathic resonance. Thoughts were shared directly, but privacy was extinct. Connor noted, "When everything is known, nothing is sacred." In 2625, they encountered a civilization that had merged with artificial intelligence. Humanity had become a hive mind, efficient, immortal, and utterly devoid of individuality. Lana wept. Connor held her. They returned home and added their reflections to the guide. Lana began organizing the entries thematically: freedom, identity, memory, connection. She created cross-references, linking societies across centuries by their values and failures. Connor was amazed. The guide was evolving beyond his vision. One night, Lana asked, "Do you think anyone will ever read this?" Connor looked at her. "I hope they do, but even if they don't, it matters that we wrote it." She nodded. "It's a record of choices, of consequences, and of hope," Connor added. They spent hours revisiting old entries, refining language, adding context. They debated terminology, tone, and whether to include their personal experiences. In the end, they decided to be honest. The guide would not be sterile. It would be lived. Lana wrote, "We are not observers, we are participants, and our presence changes everything." Connor added, "Time travel is not escape, it is confrontation." The guide was nearly complete, but neither of them wanted it to end. Chapter 8. The Dilemma. Connor stared at the final pages of the journal, the ink still drying. The guide was nearly complete. He should have felt triumphant. Instead, he felt hollow. Each entry had been a revelation, each journey a thread in the tapestry of tomorrow. But now, with the guide nearing its end, Connor found himself asking a question he had long avoided. What happens after? He sat alone in the garage, the vest folded beside him, the journal open to a page titled The Edge of Time. Lana had written the entry after their last jump, to a future where humanity had retreated underground, fearing the surface after centuries of ecological collapse. We saw a world that had survived but not lived, a world that remembered its mistakes but forgot its joy. Connor read the words again and again. Lana entered quietly, her presence grounding him. She sat beside him, her fingers brushing the edge of the journal. "You're thinking about the end," she said. He nodded. "I didn't expect it to feel like this. Like grief? Like letting go." They sat in silence. Connor turned to her. "Do you ever think about staying?" Lana tilted her head. "In your time?" He nodded. "Here, with me." She didn't answer right away. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street, the trees swaying in the breeze, the distant hum of life. "I used to think your time was primitive," she said, "messy, unfiltered. And now?" She turned to him. "Now I think it's honest." Connor rose and joined her. "You don't have to decide now, but I need to ask." Lana looked at him, her eyes soft but steady. "I've seen the future. I've seen what we become, and I've seen what we lose." She reached for his hand. "I want to stay." Connor felt something shift inside him, like gravity realigning. They returned to the garage, and together they added one final entry to the guide. "The future is not inevitable. It is shaped by those who dare to imagine something better. We have seen what's coming, and we choose to remain, to remember, to love." Connor closed the journal. Lana smiled. He took a breath, then knelt before her. "I know it's not your custom," he said, "but in mine we ask." He held out a ring, simple, silver, timeless. "Will you marry me?" Lana laughed, tears in her eyes. "It's about time." Epilogue. The guide lives on. The garage was quiet. Dust settled on the workbench, the vests hung like relics, and the journal, the time traveler's guide to tomorrow, rested inside a sealed vault beneath the floorboards. Encased in a quantum-safe container, its pages were preserved against time itself. Connor and Lana had stopped traveling. They chose to live in the present, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. They planted a garden. They hosted dinners. They read banned books and danced to vinyl records. They built a life stitched together from 2 centuries, 2 hearts, and one shared truth. Time is not a force to conquer. It is a story to honor. They never published the guide, not in their lifetime. They feared what it might become, weaponized, politicized, misunderstood. Instead, they encoded it, buried it, and left behind a single clue, a poem etched into the underside of the garage's foundation. Beneath the years, beneath the dust, a map of futures forged in trust, not to control, but to remind. The past and future are entwined. Decades passed, then centuries. The house was sold, renovated, forgotten. The garage became a workshop, then a storage unit, then rubble. But the vault remained. One day in the year 3125, a young archivist named Elian uncovered it during a dig for pre-digital artifacts. The vault resisted scans, refused to open, until Elian spoke aloud the poem, found etched into a fragment of concrete. The vault unlocked. Inside, Elian found the journal. She read it, cover to cover. She wept. She laughed. She questioned everything she thought she knew about history, about progress, about humanity. She didn't know who Connor and Lana were, but she felt them. She called the discovery the Testament of Tomorrow. It sparked a movement, not of revolution, but of reflection. People began to ask, what kind of future are we building? What kind of past are we forgetting? And somewhere in the folds of time, Connor and Lana's story lived on, not as travelers, not as scientists, but as witnesses, as lovers, as authors of a guide that dared to believe tomorrow could be better, if we chose to make it so. The end. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for notifications in your own time.